Well, hello, and welcome to another Discover Headless Tag interview from headlesscreator.com. I'm Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. As always, get a hold of me, Marcelo, at headlesscreator.com. Today's episode is focused on financial services companies and how they can migrate to a headless architecture. It's going to be a really cool interview with my guest, Shovan Samuel. He's the CEO of S-Cube. But before we get started, you guys know how this works. I'm going to tell you real quick to go get your account, a free account at headlesscreator.com. You'll have access to this episode when it goes on demand, which is usually an hour after we're done with the live interview. And then you'll also have access to pretty much everything else in the Discover Headless Tech course, including, excuse me, a bunch of tutorials. We have upcoming episodes, a bunch of podcast episodes, bonus material. But then you're also going to have access to pretty much everything else on the website. We have live lessons, courses, podcasts. You can see here a lot of courses that we offer, podcast episodes, just tons of stuff. So go get your free account. You're not going to regret it. And then you'll know a lot more about headless architecture. So with that said, let's get Shovan in, our guest today. But before I get him in, remember, for those of you watching live, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll ask Shovan. But without further ado, let's get him in. Shovan, welcome.
Hi, Marcel. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you here. Thank you for doing this. I've been looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be very exciting. A lot of companies, right, are looking to migrate. Believe it or not, headless has been around for a while now, but people are still sort of in legacy systems, right? And they're trying to migrate to headless and composable architectures.
Absolutely. I think Headless has been there for a very long time. I think it's a circle we go through, right? The website started as static and then it went dynamic. Now Headless is the new term. It's more like a modern way of doing things. So you're absolutely right in saying that.
Yeah, definitely. But before we get to the serious stuff, let's find out a little bit about you, your background. You are the CEO and founder of S-Cube. So maybe tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into tech, why did you create this company, what do you do with this company?
Absolutely. Funny enough, I created S-Cube when I was 13 years old.
13?
Yes, 13.
Oh, wow.
That was many moons ago. As you can see, I'm getting old. I'm going to be 35 next month.
Wait. You're going to be 35 and you called yourself old? I'm not going to tell you my age then. Because you're going to think I'm ancient.
No, you're not. Not at all. You're doing good.
But so you created at 13.
Yes, I created 13. I really, I think in my school we had a computer class and our teacher was teaching us front page, and I really
Ooh, I remember that.
I looked at HTML code, and we had one small code piece called marquee. When you put marquee, text goes from left to right. And I thought that was really fascinating. So I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And I just really hold on to it. I was like, I think that's probably one of the decision in my life I made. I want to be a web designer. Back in the days, it used to be a webmaster where you used to do designing,
Right.
coding, everything end to end. But I really enjoyed it. Even though we didn't have that much resources as we have right now, I think I was fortunate to really code using Notepad and really go through those journeys and see it through. And that's how SQ was born. And now we are an established company. We have around 40 developers.
Wow.
We were purely a WordPress development agency, but over the last few years, we have purely migrated into a headless, headless agency, and that is what we really want to focus on.
Yeah. So, and we're going, and Headless is here to stay, and we're obviously expanding into more of a composable architecture, right? Which Headless is a piece of, right? And bringing or orchestrating all of these pieces together into one system. But okay, so at 13 you created this company, but obviously it hasn't been there since then, right? It's just the name that you created back then. I remember, and I was going to say I have nightmares still about front page, just so you know. I still remember front page, and it's just purely nightmares now. That along with IE development,
Yes.
Internet Explorer development, yeah, that was all a nightmare. But Cool, cool. So let's jump in and let's talk about, because today we're talking about financial services companies specifically, right? And having those companies migrate to headless. Let's define, what do we mean by financial service company? So we set a bar of who we're talking to.
Absolutely. Financial service company is any companies that provide financial service product. They may be small, medium, or large. This could be banks, insurance brokers, anyone that is providing any kind of finance incentive to their customers. We also work with a lot of fintech. Fintech is now how the financial companies are using technology to serve their customers, something like Robinhood and a trading platform, those kind of things.
hmm Now it's interesting because when we think of fintech, right, those are financial services companies or financial companies that are really powered by a lot of technology. You would think those are already in a headless architecture. Is that a true statement, or are they also migrating to a headless?
I think they are. So when you look at fintech, I think this is a notion we have. Any business owners, the product is what we really focus on. So any fintech, the product is really outstanding. But when it comes to the marketing website, it is something that's like, oh, we need the leads, but looking at the technology is something that is not really prioritized. So I think there are a lot of Fortune 100 companies and large organization in the headless space. Their websites are using headless CMS, but I wouldn't say all of them are there yet.
So, since you focus on fintech and financial services, what are the differences for them compared to other companies for looking into headless? Like, what are some of the special needs that they have?
Absolutely. I've been working with financial service company for a long time. I work for a Fortune 100 company called Forex.com and City Index. There are a few nuances that comes when you works with financial company, service companies, right? Because it's quite regulated. You need to really care about regulation, your security, your governance, how your how do you manage your GDPR? How are users accessing your content? Where are you hosting it? Is it within our premises? So there are a lot of other security nuances we need to really consider when we go into, when we are building for financial service. So it's just like, we have normal tech plus additional things to be considered.
It's interesting you said that, 'cause security is probably a huge thing, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Security, I think security and the compliance is the biggest, deal with the financial service because, obviously they're dealing with, customers' finance, personal information. So that is, it's always of a priority.
So let's talk about, because when we're talking about headless, we're usually talking about the cloud, right?
Right.
With financial companies, sometimes they can't have data in the cloud. They have to host it internally. So when we're talking about headless here, are we talking about, mostly for a financial services company, an architecture that is mostly hosted within their premises, or in the cloud, but with some special security implications?
Absolutely. I think before, I think hosting in premises was obviously preferred, but I think everyone has come in terms saying this is not going to really work if you really want to scale your business and if you want to have performance. So most of the headless CMS companies do provide an enterprise level option that has the SLAs in place, that has the PCI and all the necessary protocol that is needed to be an enterprise graded service. So companies are really open to work with vendors as long as they follow these protocols.
So so for financial companies, what should they be looking out for, or what should they be asking when they're looking for a headless, let's say CMS? Are there specific questions they should ask to make sure that the vendor they're choosing is compliant with the financial services?
Yeah, I think the basic thing in terms of, are you PCI compliant? Have you got single sign-ons in place so that way they can easily user management? The second thing you're looking into is the governance. When you have a CMS, have you got the right governance in place? Have you got audit trials? So whatever changes are making, can you really get track who's made those kind of changes, right? At the same time, if you do want to decouple some of this data, can you have control over the data if you need to?
Yeah, that's a big. You mean getting the information out of that?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So Talk about a little bit about the benefits that they gain by going to headless. I mean, that may be different than anybody else getting, going headless.
Absolutely. So when I used to work for a financial service company, the biggest challenge we have is because everything was on premise. Um, and this is why, fintechs are way ahead because the technology, kind of the dinosaurs, is really big, right? Because now you need specialist people to kind of do your networking or CI/CD, or all those different kind of things that comes with managing a website. For example, right, if you're using a CMS that is hosted in premises and is enterprise graded, you are really locked into all the features that comes with it. For example, you might want to use a personalization engine or a DAM. And when you're using a monolithic approach, you're not really able to use best in class. And this way, financial services are really falling behind because they're not getting best in class. Rather, they are working with what they have. Especially when things are even hosted on your own premises, it gets much, much harder. Fintechs or financial services, as they go into cloud and as they embrace into the headless CMS, what they start realizing is some of these burdens can be really, released, right? They can work with, AWS or Azure, where they can really, do the manage your hosting and CI/CD pipelines. And now when they start decoupling the CMS, they can start choosing, okay, based on our roadmap and our priority, personalization is our priority right now. Our vendor, our CMS, or the vendor that is not doing it right now, they can easily switch between different vendors. And now because they have different service level agreement with different vendors, they can easily own the CMS rather than waiting for the monolithic CMS to tell you what the roadmap is looking like, what the 6 months or 12 months is looking like. If your strategy is going into AI or kind of the mission language, you have tools that can plug into headless to get you moving forward. So I think really getting things moving forward and helping the marketing team to kind of get their goals quicker I think is one of the biggest benefits.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because the easily migrating into different CMSs and stuff, even in headless, sometimes it's not as easy as easily, right? I mean, that's sort of the reality, especially when you start gluing all this stuff together via APIs and the codes. It's hard to unglue things, right?
Yeah.
And full disclosure, I work for Uniform. We offer a system that allows you sort of unglue this and put pieces together. But the reason I'm asking you this is because headless is one piece. Composability and or system orchestration is sort of the bigger pieces that gives you the ability to do this easy kind of, changing, gluing systems together, or not gluing because that's a bad word, but composing systems together, right? What is your thought and take on composable systems, right? And sort of like this composable architecture, and how does headless fit into that as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, migrating headless is not easy,
Right.
right? It is just like any migration. It's
Yeah.
painful. To be honest, it can be even more painful because you're working with cutting edge technology. The real difference you start benefiting is because any companies you work for, if you're monolithic, every 18 months, every 24 months, you are going to be upgrading. What happens is every 2 years you go back to the same cycle of migration, right? It's a loop you go into, and it's a really painful process companies go
Mm-hmm.
into. And mid migration you have a new updates, and then it just falls down. The advantage with headless we have is you do go through same kind of migration. It's going to be complicated, you have to go through those challenges, but once you have the first setup in place, the
Mm-hmm.
further migrations are going to be easier because now you have your foundation layers in place. Think of it as a Lego block. Right now you can just move things around based on different technology. For example, back in the days, .NET or Laravel or PHP was popular, right? Now we are
Mm-hmm.
using React and Next.js. Now you can just really remove the front and use whatever the new technology or tech stack is. So I think the initial stage is going to be similar to any kind of migration, but it is the feature proofing is what it is going to help, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's 100% true. One thing, like you said, I think the migration from legacy to headless it's hard, and I think one of the reasons it's hard is because you're going from an unstructured, I was going to say content model, but it's not a real content model. You're just going from unstructured HTML pages content to a highly structured content model, right? Headless CMSs are all highly structured content
Yeah.
models. And converting, I've been through many of these conversions where you're going from, an HTML page to a content model that separates the design. That's sort of the pain. But I think in the long term, you're, like you said, you're setting yourself up for the future iterations to be much, much easier in upgrades, right? But what tips do you have? Because I feel like that is, besides the technology infrastructure, just the content migration is a huge deal from legacy to headless. What tips and best practices do you have around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing is having a right team in place is really important, either your
Yeah.
in-house team or your agency like ourselves, right? You need to ensure, like, migrating to any technology, you need to have the right partners or the right training in place. Content modelists and your developers straight away go build the headless, because we have had clients who directly went and built headless and they're like, hey, what is this? This looks just like monolithic. And I've seen headless CMS where they have HTML codes in there. So if you do not have the right foundation and the right team, I think it is not worth going through the journey, because it's going to be the same thing. You're going to do the remigration, right? And the advice I would give is, if you don't have the right team in place, the best way to do is do a proof of concept or do a MVP on a smaller project, right? Pick a smaller microsite that you can do the migration, where you can really understand what is content modeling, how do we set up this post, how do you set up this product, how are these links things working together, what is the taxonomy, how can we feed things together. So when you start thinking of in a smaller structure, smaller way of doing it, when you start building in a bigger in the bigger website, I think it becomes easier. Otherwise, I think it can be a really big nightmare companies can go through.
Well, I love what you just said about building a legacy on top of a headless, because I've seen many companies do that where they basically migrated an HTML page in legacy to an HTML page in headless, and
Yeah,
all they're doing is paying more for a headless architecture and using it as a legacy, right?
yeah.
And I think that's involving, you said something very key, is involving the right people, because you've got to think beyond. And I love your take. I'd love to get your take on omni-channel delivery, but you've got to think beyond your web page, right? And not just delivering to other channels like SMS, newsletter, mobile, VR, whatever, but also maybe customer support in Salesforce. You want to deliver some of that content there, right? So, what are some best practices and tips that you may have for financial companies to start thinking about all of these channels, whether it's direct to customer or indirectly to customer?
Absolutely. One of my client, paraphrased something I said very interestingly. They said, headless CMS is like, it's like your brain of your company, right? So when
Yeah,
you start thinking of headless, right, when you start thinking of your content, that is your brain of your company, right?
right.
You can decide for a product page, you can have this much information for public, this is for your customers, this is for internal use, and this all your IP can be stored into a headless CMS, and you can choose for a website. I need to show this 5 or 4 items. For a mobile user, I need to show this 10 items. For a mobile app user who are logged in, show them the pricing, right? If it's a mobile app user who's a business customer who's on the customer service page, show them the information. I think when we start thinking of headless CMS more like your content as your brain for your business, and then you start really structuring what goes where and what needs to be shown to what kind of users, I think that is when you really get the power of headless. So I think instead of going top down, you go bottom up, like what is our content, how can we show it to what channel, and what are the kind of the channels we have in the business right now and in the future, and how is this content going to tie up into that. And that's probably a good way to think about when you start strategizing for headless CMS.
So, who are the team members that you recommend outside of agencies like hiring you guys, right?
Yeah.
Outside internal team members, who do you recommend that they bring on to make sure they're choosing the right CMS, all the compliances we're talking about, but also start thinking about that enterprise content model, single source of truth, reorganizing taxonomy, and the billion other things you need to do when you're migrating?
Absolutely. There are a few people you can think about. I think the first and foremost is migrating headless CMS. It's not going to take, it's not going to happen within a month or two. It's going to, take, at least 6 months to a year, depends on the complexity. I think we really need a champion in the business, a senior
Yeah.
leader who understands what it is and who can kind of be a buffer to tell the senior stakeholders to to trust in the process more than anything
Mm-hmm.
else. When you do not, because I worked with a project where when the senior team does not understand the complexity or the process, I think you get a lot of pressure, and because of the pressure you might not be able to deliver the quality of work you need. So you need one champion who's championing this project, right?
And I do want to add to that. I'm 100% with you, because in my previous company, I was that person. I was that champion. And a huge part of this migration is evangelizing and teaching people to think differently, right? Because you've got to think in a different way when you're going headless than when you're going legacy. So I just wanted to add 100% on top of what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. Champion. Second thing I think is we need someone. The best thing is someone in the business, a technical lead who understands all the nuances, like how is all the system set up, what is a business process, how are our website, our CRM, how are they looking like right now? A system
Mm-hmm.
architect inside, and maybe an external system architect, or the system architect in-house does some kind of training mid course to understand how this is laid out. So we need a solution engineer or system architect who can kind of lay the foundation of how this is looking like, right? Following that, I think two other people we really need is a product manager, who kind of really can start categorizing each of this product to see how they are linking, what are the APIs we need, and the content model expert. We definitely need a content model expert. Without a content model expert, we cannot do much. And I just want to give a shout out to you, because my team uses Headless Creator from day one to learn the content modeling.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So I think having a content, and it's a very specific skill, right?
Yeah.
I really think if you think of future employability, two things, right? One is content modeling, one is prompt engineering. These are two skills I think people need to start get a hold of more
Yeah.
than anything else, right?
I agree. Yeah, 100% with you. Okay, no, and I agree on the content modeling expert, because, but you also, I think you need a domain expert in the company. What do you think about that? Somebody that really understands the content and the importance of that content in the company, right?
Absolutely. You need a domain. I mean, yeah, 100% you need a domain expert within the company, who will help kind of categorize and organize this content and, let us know where things are more than anything else.
What are your thoughts on having an enterprise content model? Because I know a lot of companies, they'll start creating content types, right? But having an enterprise with like a content modeling expert that can focus people and make sure that, they stick to that enterprise content model.
Absolutely. I think we're working with one of our clients, doing a digital transformation project for them right now. And the way we're looking on the enterprise level is we're literally scaling back to understand all the business processes and how content model can be laid out across the board, right? So we can get information and sharing this information using across the whole company rather than just your CMS. So I think having thinking along the side of how can, having enterprise level content modeling and having those kind of expertise in house to in each of those domains or each of those kind of technology is very important.
So what about once they switch the architecture, are they going to see any improvement in website speed? Because I mean, potentially you're talking to a variety of APIs from different companies, right? As opposed to the monolith, which is all in one place. So, is there a performance improvement? You know, talk
Ab-
to us about that and any other challenges that they may run into.
Absolutely. Let me start with the challenges,
Okay,
because it is going to be a totally different way of working, right?
right.
With monolithic, you're so used to clicking something and previewing something, right? With headless, depends on what technology you use, you might need to have to wait for a few minutes for things to be built, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your CM is going to be different. Now you're working with multiple different kind of vendors, right? So there are going to be a learning curve that you need to go through, but I can assure you it is going to be much better experience than a monolithic learning curve, right? Because things are much more easier and everyone has expertise in there. In terms of performer wise, I think one thing people don't talk about is the performance of your content editors. I think because I have worked with global content editors, it's taken us some time, 1 to 2 days to have landing pages, right? Soon as you come to headless, having more structured way of doing things, building your pages can really come within half a day to half a day's worth of work. Rather than spending few days, you can build things much quicker. The editor experience is much easier. So we have seen our editors love using, we use content, for example, as their CMS because it's so much easier and it's so much enjoyable, it's so much faster. Finding things gets easier, right? If your editors are enjoying it, which means they can produce more pages, right? And in terms,
However, on that, if you don't mind me interrupting just for a second, because yes, but sometimes it's harder, and I think that's where the role of the content architect comes in, because with headless, your content model is very tied to your front, the way the admin is designed, right? Basically, So and that's why it's important to include. We were talking about all these people, to include all these people, and I think we forgot to mention content authors, right?
Yes.
Because they need to test that ad authoring experience, and I think it's really important to make sure that when you're designing the content model, that you take into account the authoring experience, because you're right, it could be much easier than legacy, but I've also seen it where it was much harder than legacy,
Yeah.
right? So you've got to make sure you've got the right person managing this content model. I just wanted to insert that because I don't, I want to make sure people understand there are some challenges potentially if you do it wrong.
Absolutely. I think what we're saying is, if the right foundation or the strategy is not in place, it is going to be, it's going to be painful, right? More than anything else, right?
Yeah.
We want to make sure the right workshops and right people are in the conversation to let us know what the pain points are and to let us know what the workflows look like more than anything else.
Now, what about, so from a benefits perspective, what about scalability and you mentioned POCs and quickly iterating? Is that something that financial companies can do with Headless much better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think building a POC, for example, you want to really scale to a multi-language, multi-regional website. I think in monolithic there
Mm,
are options are there, but it is not very clear cut. With the headless CMS, you can easily plug into a translation engine, get your translation within
yeah.
within few minutes. And we have worked with clients where we have much market maturity model. For example, in the UK, you might have 1,000 pages and you want to test the European market. You might not want to go with 1,000 pages. You go with, like, 20 pages, get them quickly translated, do some campaigns to see, is this a market we want to enter or not. So having those kind of market maturity model and building it becomes a lot more easier to have a headless CMS to scale to different regions and different offerings much quicker.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very important point that you brought up, which is the ability to translate, right? Or localize, actually, which
Yeah,
is more important than just translating. Translating
correct.
is just a part of localization, right? You may have to change images.
Hmm.
There's a whole bunch to localizing, and I think by default, headless CMSs and headless technologies support that without hesitation, right?
Absolutely. I think headless CMS, I think headless CMS is really good in terms of for us to grow multiple language, or localizing it and personalizing it. And it's a lot more easier compared to monolithic to go scale using headless. And I think a financial service, when you have global offering, these are kind of things we need to be thinking about, because as a fintech, you might be Series A right now, when you're in Series B, Series C, you really want to scale. At that time, your website should be your last problem, right? Your website shouldn't be the reason that you can't grow your business.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about this new way of thinking that we were mentioning, and we mentioned it a couple of times already, which is a paradigm shift going from a legacy to a headless, right? Where you have, in legacy, you normally have content and design all mixed up together, right? It's your HTML page and you just deliver to your website. In headless, it's a paradigm shift. You have to think differently because you have to think of your content as content that's delivered to multiple delivery channels. Some of them may require HTML, but others may not, right? VR doesn't use HTML. SMS doesn't use HTML. So, how do you train the people in your clients? How do you get them to start thinking in those terms? And specifically, like authors, right? Authors are so used to, like, I want to see what it looks like. I need that WYSIWYG. In a headless, omni-channel means omni-channel. Doesn't mean just web page.
It's definitely a learning curve, right? I think this is where I think managing expectation really comes upfront. I think
Yeah.
one thing we kind of push past is your kind of the benefits, right? Benefits in terms of how fast your website is loading, right? We have seen clients whose website has increased by 80%, right? Having a faster website means you're increasing your searchability, which means the user experience is better, which means you're getting more leads. So ensuring the kind of the benefits of going, even though they might not be able to see things quicker, there's a reason behind it. The second thing we also think about is, again, managing expectation. If you think about any website, 80% of the website content doesn't need to get updated. right, is that 20%, your homepage, your blog, your news. There are only certain parts of the website that you need to keep your content up to date regularly. Other pages, you're going to be doing it during your, your campaign or product launches. It's just letting the teams know, to ensure that, those pages needs to build. It's going to take, 2 minutes or 1 second to build, and having that kind of a mindset. And the third thing is, I think headless technology has really moved forward. If you're using anything like Vercel and Next.js, we can start seeing preview of things, right? If you build things properly using SSG, you can start seeing preview of how things are looking like.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're building headless, we also start building, like a repository of module repository, so clients can always see, okay, how are these kind of modules looking like, and what are they look. We go to story blocks, build those kind of module examples of what they're building, so they're not always left hanging without knowing what is happening.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about SEO. How does that different when managing it through a headless system versus a legacy system?
I think
Or what are some things they need to keep an eye out on?
Yeah, I think with headless system, I think the advantage we have is we can really, the technical SEO becomes a lot more exciting, right? Because now you have the content model, and the SEO, technical SEO experts can really think about, what kind of schemas they want to have in place. Now, we can start thinking about, Chat GPT and Google, right? They're going to start,
Right.
pulling information. So structuring your data becomes a lot more easier. And now, because you're using content models and we have different taxonomy, when you want to start doing programmatic SEO, you don't have to break your head, right? You have list of companies, you have list of products. Getting auto generated pages becomes a lot more
Much
easier,
easier.
right? So for technical SEO, I think it's a very exciting,
Because
having
we're
the
going to a structured content format versus an unstructured, right?
exactly, a structured content format, and content is easily available to be distributed. So I think for technical SEO, I think headless is very exciting.
Now, what about analytics and tracking? I mean, anything that to look out for there?
I think analytics and tracking, I think it will work, just like a monolithic. The only thing is you got to think about is you're rebuilding, right? Ensuring your GTM parameters in place. You're finding the right right parameters for your buttons, and just having a proper checklist to ensure everything is being tracked. The biggest advantage we have is now we are uh, with headless CMS, and with the new single sign-on and things in place, sharing data with your platform and your website gets a lot more easier. So personalizing the content and making sure you understand who the users are and giving them what they need becomes a lot more easier.
Well, and speaking of personalization, right? Because when you do go headless and composable, you can start picking the best of breed for personalization for content management system. Um, but the key, I think, to personalization is not just personalizing the web, but personalizing all channels
Hmm.
without having to jump into multiple systems, right? So, you want to talk a little bit about that because that's something that I believe it's really important.
Absolutely. I think because I've been the purchasing decision of various monolithic CMS. The biggest selling point is, hey, you can do personalization. But when it actually comes to the actual personalization, it is near to impossible to get it right. Even simple things, changing the banner based on returning users. I think with something like a composable system in place, making and having a deeper personalization, and that personalization appearing to different channels gets a lot more easier because everything is decoupled, right? You could really go into the middleware and see what you really need to change.
Yeah. What about integrations? That as companies are looking to migrate, what should they start thinking about for integrating headless tech with their internal systems? Let's say they have Salesforce or an HR system or another financial system, whatever they want to expose to customers, right? What kind of things should they think about when doing that?
I think the first thing I would say is the global search. Having a headless CMS
Hmm.
means you can search across your entire product line, and you can show the results, things which people need to log in, and they can see without logging in. Because now you have the content model across your enterprise. If you have a enterprise content model, you have that ability, right? So your search gets a lot more easier and a lot more accessible to users, and then you can kind of lock it down based on whichever channels they are in. The customer experience, I think, is something that is getting, the way we need to start thinking about customer experience is changing, because we really think about, other channels where we are hosting our documentation, our help desk information. Now we can host in our own CMS, which can serve the content into your, help desk systems, right? And the last thing is your forms, using HubSpot or any kind of marketer. Now your forms can be a lot more personalized, and you can send a lot more information, because it's all API driven, and uh, giving back information and sharing information between two systems becomes a lot more easier.
So obviously, we're big pushers of people wanting needing to migrate to headless, but who shouldn't? I mean, is there some sort of company that you think, look, if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
I don't think everyone should migrate to headless. I don't think I think we are excited because we are in the scene, right?
Yeah.
I'm excited because this I know what it is, but I don't think it is for everyone. If you do not have a strategy to grow, you're happy with whatever it is. If it's not broken, don't change it, right? You might just need to do few optimization to get your website running as it is. If you do not have requirements for multiple languages, you do not have requirements for multiple regions or any kind of external integrations, there's no reason to think about headless, right? And the last thing is, if you do not have a proper development support at tech
Yeah.
team, don't even don't even try it,
Don't even
right?
think about it.
Don't even
Right.
think about it, because it's a very special skills. Not many people have it, as is a cutting edge technology, right? So you need to make sure you have the support system in place in order for you to venture into this journey. And that is why I said, if you're a smaller company, try a POC, MVP, try it for a few months, make sure that your business can understand what it is, and it is right for your business, and then make that decision. I don't think it's for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Siobhan, I think you convinced me. I'm going to go ahead and migrate to headless. But all kidding aside, for companies that say, yeah, we need to migrate to headless, before hiring you, obviously going to your agency and hiring you to help them out, but before doing any of that, what are some steps they could take today?
I think the best thing they can do is, once they understand this is a transformation they're going to go through, laying of the foundations or the building blocks of their digital assets, right? These are our website assets, this is what it's looking like. And then thinking and auditing what is in place, what is working, what is not working. Hey, this is kind of doing some of their own training, understanding what is a content model, what does this look like, kind of getting the head around how it may look like, and having those strategies in place, and also thinking of a roadmap. Okay, if you want to go to headless, what is the main KPI we are doing it, right? We're not doing it because Showan and Masalo is just hyping us up, right? There should be a defined KPI, right? It's like, okay, we need to
Right.
increase our search, or we need to have a better user experience, a better internal system, or we just tired of monolithic, right? Whatever that KPI is, that KPI needs to be defined. And once those kind of things are defined and they have a buy-in from the teams, I think that is the next step, is to source out an agency that can help them to deliver the project.
Yeah, definitely. Those are really, really good tips. Okay, so what's the future that finance companies should be on the lookout for? Obviously, AI, it's huge, but from a headless perspective, I mean, does AI even come into this formula, or what else should they be keeping an eye on?
Absolutely, because I've been working with few POCs and AI. I think if you have a structured data, right? Let's imagine you have 100 product pages. If you have a structured data, which means you have a catalog of all your product pages with title and description. Imagine you can take that, from your headless CMS, put it into open AI, and say, hey, here's all my title and description, this is how we write, this is our tone of voice, this is the kind of the strategy we use. And then you input your own company's information, and next 10 product AI can write it for you with a click
Yeah.
of a button, right? So I think, if you really want to embrace the journey on using AI, ML, things like, now, nowadays people are manually adding social cards, right? In the future, we don't need to do that. We can have, Mid-Journey or OpenAI into your CMS, which can generate those kind of images, right? So I
Yeah.
think the scope is a lot of things that we can automate. But in order to automate, as I say, I had a talk last week. I say you having a foundation technology is important, right?
Right.
When you have your foundation technology, that is a structured content, and your tech stacks in place, exploring these becomes easier. Otherwise, this is just something in your roadmap that just get kicked out every sprint, right? So that's not something we need.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. If you're thinking of AI and generative AI, having a headless system in place is important because you're going to be talking through a lot of APIs, and you're going to need structured content to properly integrate AI, right? So that definitely makes a lot of sense. Siobhan, it's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you for sharing all the knowledge. I know you're going to be back doing a lesson on the beginner's guide to DHTp, right? We're going to have you back on that soon. So I'm looking forward to that as well. If people want to get a hold of you, is the email there the best or anything else?
Yep, the email over there is best, or they can go to my website. If they really want to talk to me, there's a booking form. They can book in sometime.
That's scube.co.
That's correct.
Excellent. Siobhan, thank you so much. I really enjoyed having you here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to great to talk and talk about headless and with two people who really enjoy it. So this is great. I can do it all
Definitely.
night.
Definitely. All right, Siobhan, thank you so much. And thanks to the rest of you for attending today. I hope you really enjoyed it. And please stay tuned for many more episodes coming soon. And like always, go check out the website, headlesscreator.com, for more episodes, courses, lessons, live streams, tons of stuff over there for you. All 100% free. So we will see you on the next one. Cheers.